What if the pirate hunter never met Monkey D. Luffy? What if the man who dreams of becoming the greatest swordsman in the world was actually raised by the very monster he swore to defeat? Imagine a timeline where Roronoa Zoro does not become the loyal right hand of the future pirate king, but instead walks a dark solitary path bathed in the shadow of Dracul Mihawk. Let us rewind the clock to the East Blue. A young green-haired boy stands at the edge of Shimotsuki village clutching a white katana to his chest. Kuina is gone. The promise to become the strongest swordsman burns in his heart, but his grief makes him reckless. Instead of training at the dojo for years, Zoro steals a small boat and sets sail immediately. He is just a kid blinded by tears and ambition with absolutely no sense of direction. He drifts aimlessly for weeks. Starving and dehydrated, he lays at the bottom of his tiny wooden boat waiting for the end. But fate has a wicked sense of humor. The water ripples. A massive shadow looms over his pathetic vessel. Zoro weakly opens his eyes to see a small boat resembling a coffin adorned with green candles. Sitting upon it is a man with piercing yellow eyes holding a cross-shaped pendant. Dracul Mihawk is wandering the East Blue out of pure boredom. He glances down at the dying boy expecting nothing, but then he notices the sword clutched in the boy's bleeding hand. The Wado Ichimonji, a blade of incredible pedigree. Mihawk asks the boy what he intends to do with such a masterpiece. Zoro, barely able to stand, bites the hilt of the sword and declares he will use it to pierce the heart of the strongest swordsman. Mihawk does not laugh. He is intrigued. The sheer audacity of this starving child declaring war on him is the most entertaining thing he has experienced in years. With a single flick of his wrist, Mihawk shatters Zoro's small boat. The boy falls into the freezing ocean. Mihawk pulls him out by the collar, tosses him onto the coffin boat, and decides right then and there to take a stray dog back home. Zoro wakes up not in a humble dojo, but in the gloomy, towering ruins of Kuraigana Island. This is his new reality. Mihawk is not a father figure. He is a ruthless, unrelenting master. While the kids in the East Blue practice with bamboo swords, Zoro is forced to survive against the ferocious humandrills of the island. These baboons are giant, intelligent, and copy the fighting styles of warriors. For the first few years, Zoro is not even allowed to hold his 3 swords. Mihawk strictly forbids it. He tells the boy that until he can master one blade holding 3 is just an insult to the art of the sword. This rejection fuels an immense rage inside Zoro. Every single day is a fight for survival. His body is covered in scars long before he even reaches his teenage years. But this brutal environment does something incredible. Because he is constantly fighting beasts that mimic his own growing strength, Zoro develops his instincts at an unnatural pace. By the age of 15, he is not just cutting steel, he is beginning to understand the breadth of all things. Mihawk watches from the balcony of his castle, sipping wine, observing the boy slowly transform into a demon. One evening under a blood-red sky, Zoro finally defeats the boss of the Humandrills using a single clean strike. Mihawk draws his tiny knife, the same one he used to humiliate opponents, and challenges the boy. If Zoro can make him step backward just 1 inch, he earns the right to his 3-sword style. The clash echoes across the ruined island. Zoro channels all his childhood trauma, his promise to Kuina, and his agonizing training into one strike. For a fraction of a second, his blade turns slightly black. Mihawk's eyes widen in surprise. He takes half a step back. A small smirk appears on the warlord's face. He throws Zoro the other 2 swords. The training wheels are off. A few years pass. Zoro is now 19 years old. He has never met a rubber boy in a straw hat. He has never fought Buggy or Arlong. He is known in the underworld as the Hawk's Shadow. The world government becomes highly uncomfortable with the fact that the greatest swordsman in the world is secretly raising a weapon of mass destruction. The Marine headquarters dispatch a fleet of 5 warships to Kuragana Island under the guise of a routine inspection. But their real mission is to eliminate the apprentice before he becomes a threat. As the massive marine ships drop anchor off the foggy coast, Mihawk does not even stand up from his chair. He simply looks at Zoro, who is polishing his 3 blades. The master tells the student that guests have arrived and they are ruining his view. Zoro ties his dark green bandana around his head. He walks down to the shore alone. What happens next changes the balance of the world forever. The 5 marine warships unleash a deafening barrage of cannon fire toward the foggy shore. Hundreds of explosive shells rain down on the ruined beach. Zoro does not blink. He does not even take a step back. He simply takes a deep breath, letting the cold air fill his lungs. Drawing his 3 blades, he enters a stance that looks hauntingly familiar to anyone who has ever faced the greatest swordsman, but with a brutal, chaotic twist. With a single explosive movement, Zoro unleashes a massive flying slash. The ocean itself parts in terror. In a matter of seconds, the shockwave slices entirely through the hardened steel of the marine galleon. Mass collapse. Hulls are split clean in half. The deafening roar of the cannons is completely silenced, replaced by the screams of terrified soldiers sinking into the freezing depth. Zoro slowly sheathes his swords, turns his back to the sinking graveyard, and walks up the hill to finish his nap. He did not even break a sweat. Days later at Marine headquarters, Fleet Admiral Sengoku reads the survivor report with his hands trembling in absolute horror. The world government realizes they have made a catastrophic miscalculation. The boy is no longer a stray dog. He is an apex predator. Around this exact same time, news spreads that the warlord crocodile has been quietly stripped of his title following a massive scandal in the desert kingdom of Alabasta. A seat among the 7 warlords of the sea is now vacant. Sengoku and the Gorosei hold an emergency meeting. They know they cannot afford to provoke a full-scale war against Kuraigana Island. Having 2 supreme swordsmen roaming the seas as enemies of the state would be a nightmare. They decide the only way to control the beast is to put a collar on him. A messenger bat arrives at Kuraigana Island carrying a black envelope sealed with the world government crest. Zoro reads the formal invitation to become a Shichibukai and immediately throws it into the fireplace. He cares absolutely nothing for politics titles or doing errands for the Marine. All he wants is booze and strong opponents to test his steel. But Mihawk, sitting gracefully in his velvet chair, raises a glass of red wine and speaks up. The master explains that the warlord title is merely a convenient piece of paper. It grants absolute freedom. It means Zoro can sail the Grand Line cross borders and hunt down the most notorious pirates in the world without annoying Marine fleets chasing his ship every single day. The promise of infinite strong opponents without the tedious distractions is enough to change the mind of the young swordsman. Zoro accepts the title. For the next year, the Grand Line learns to fear the new warlord. Zoro sails alone in a sleek black ship hunting high-bounty pirates purely for sport and to pay for his endless tab at various taverns. He is a solitary ghost. He has no crew, no navigator, and constantly gets lost traversing the dangerous waters of the New World purely by accident. But his terrible sense of direction makes him even more unpredictable. Pirates never know where the demon swordsman will appear next. He becomes a living myth. Then the foundation of the world is shaken to its core. Port Guest D. Ace II Division, commander of the Whitebeard Pirates, is captured and sentenced to public execution. The drums of war begin to beat. The world government issues an absolute mandatory summons to all 7 warlords. They must gather at Marine headquarters to face the wrath of the strongest man in the world. Zoro is sleeping off a massive hangover in a random tavern on Sabaody Archipelago when the Marine vice admirals come to escort him. He is highly annoyed by the interruption. He is about to slice the officers to ribbons when he hears the name of the enemy they are facing: Edward Newgate, Whitebeard, the man who holds the title of the strongest and wields a supreme grade blade. A fiery grin stretches across Zoro's face. His blood boils with absolute excitement. He grabs his 3 swords and boards the Marine vessel willingly. The atmosphere at Marineford is suffocating. 100,000 elite Marines stand in rigid formation, sweating in the cold air. The execution platform towers over the bay, and standing at the front lines acting as the ultimate shield for the world government are the 7 warlords. There stands Roronoa Zoro. He looks utterly bored, ignoring the political tension around him. Next to him stands his master Dracule Mihawk, looking equally stoic. The teacher and the student side by side, ready for war. The ocean begins to bubble. The massive shadows of the Moby Dick and its allied fleet rise from the depth. Whitebeard shatters the very air itself, causing tsunamis to rise on both sides of the island. The summit war has officially begun. The Marines charge forward, screaming their battle cries. But Zoro does not care about the small fry. His predatory eyes scan the battlefield, cutting through the chaos. He is not here to protect the Marine. He is here to test his blade against the legends of the old era. And his gaze locks onto a man covered in blue flame, Marco the Phoenix. The frozen bay of Marineford is a theater of absolute chaos, but Zoro feels completely at home. He steps forward, his heavy boots crushing the thick ice. He unsheathes his swords, and instead of targeting the weak pirate captains, he launches himself straight into the sky. Marco the Phoenix is diving toward the execution platform wrapped in brilliant blue flame. Zoro intercepts the first commander midair with a devastating 3-sword strike. The impact rings out like a thunderclap. Marco is forced to cross his wings to block surprise by the immense crushing weight of the young warlord attack. The blue flames instantly heal the shallow cut on his feathers, but Marco realizes immediately that this is no ordinary government dog. This boy is a pure killer. However, Zoro quickly loses interest. Slashing a magical bird that constantly regenerates is a waste of his energy. He lands gracefully on a frozen battleship, and his demonic aura shifts toward a much larger pride. Through the smoke and the screaming Marines, Zoro locks eyes with Edward Newgate. The massive Yonko stands on the bow of the Moby Dick, a living, breathing earthquake. Zoro remembers the promise he made in a tiny wooden boat years ago, to pierce the heart of the absolute strongest. Without a single second of hesitation, Zoro completely ignores his official orders to defend the platform. He abandons his post and sprints directly through the center of the battlefield, slicing through both pirates and Marines who dare to block his path. Mihawk watches from a distance, crossing his arms over his chest. A faint, proud smile appears on the older swordsman's face. He makes no move to stop his pupil. He wants to see exactly how far his creation can push the boundaries of reality. Zoro leaps high above the roaring giants and the frantic admiral. He channels every ounce of his armament, haki coating his three blades in a pitch-black impenetrable armor. The sky above him seems to darken as purple lightning crackles violently around his sword. He unleashes his most devastating secret technique, aiming a massive flying slash straight for the chest of Whitebeard. The energy blade is so terrifyingly huge, it carves a deep canyon into the thick ice of the bay. But before the attack can reach the old legend, a massive heavy figure steps in the way. Diamond Jozu intercepts the slash. The collision of Supreme Haki and Unbreakable Diamond creates a shockwave that knocks Vice Admirals clean off their feet. Jozu heavily grunts his glittering diamond skin, groaning under the sheer cutting power of the attack. With a massive heave, the commander finally deflects the energy into the sky, cutting a low-hanging cloud entirely in half. Zoro lands on the ice, panting slightly, but smiling like an absolute maniac. Whitebeard looks down at the fierce green-haired boy. The strongest man in the world lets out a booming, thunderous laugh. He asks the reckless brat for his name. Zoro points his blood-stained blade at the giant and declares himself as the man who will soon sit at the absolute pinnacle of all swordsmen. Whitebeard strikes the blunt end of his weapon against the ground, causing the entire island to violently tremble. He openly praises the untamed spirit of the boy, noting that the sea is breeding absolute monsters in this new era. The brief exchange of respect is violently interrupted as Admiral Akainu rains magma fists from the darkened sky, plunging the war back into desperate survival. Hours later, the Summit War reaches its tragic and bloody conclusion. Red-haired Shanks finally arrives to stop the senseless fighting. As the terrifying Yonko walks through the silent battlefield, his sharp, commanding eyes land directly on Zoro. Shanks pauses, sensing the overwhelming bloodlust and the familiar deadly teachings of his old rival radiating from the young warlord. Shanks knows instantly that this boy is a dark calamity waiting to happen. But the war is officially over. Mihawk calls out to his pupil, telling him it is time to leave. They have absolutely no interest in fighting a one-armed man today. Zoro quietly sheathes his blades, his muscular body covered in fresh, glorious scars from fighting the elite commanders of the old era. As the small coffin boat sails away from the burning apocalyptic ruins of Marineford, Zoro looks down at his calloused hand. He felt the terrifying power of Whitebeard today. He saw the unbelievable heights of the world with his own eyes, and instead of fear, he feels an unquenchable burning thirst.